In today's episode of Today in World War II, January 3rd, the Japanese massacre more civilians in off of Indonesia, Dutch East Indies. The Japanese leadership decides all of a sudden that maybe we should stop the Allies in the Southwest Pacific, New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. A British commando slash special boats squadron member does a hell of a job taking out an Italian light cruiser. Um, a one of the most famous Marine Corps aces was shot down and captured by the Japanese. And finally, the American High Command decides that Nimitz was going to take over and be in charge of the Iwo Jima and Okinawa uh, offensives, and MacArthur would be in charge of the ground forces. Let's get started. All right, so today, January 3rd, 1942, we're going to continue a theme that we've seen since the Japanese invaded or just mounted their offensive in starting on January 7th with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, by this time, they had reached the Dutch East Indies, which is now called Indonesia. They hadn't completely invaded and taken over yet, but they were on their way. There was a lot of Japanese submarine activity there. In today's date, I-158, a Japanese submarine, sank a Dutch ship off of Boyington Island in the Dutch East Indies. Now, all 94 of the passengers survived, and they were in lifeboats. So what did the Japanese do? Well, they rammed one of the lifeboats, and they attacked the others with machine guns. They killed almost everybody. Only three of them survived. So, I just want to reiterate this is a common theme I'm going to be talking about in this series is that all the people that now are hand-wringing about the fact that the United States dropped two nuclear weapons, two atomic bombs against the Japanese at the end of the war. Um, the Japanese reaped what they sowed, and they were so barbaric and inhumane in how they treated their people that by the time this came around and we knew what faced us, and we are going to probably take a million casualties by invading the home islands, that it was like if there was a way to stop the war without that, so be it. So, one small episode off the Dutch East Indies by a Japanese submarine in is like a piece of a quilt of overall barbarity that ended up, biting them in the butt later when the war turned against them without any hope. Um, you have hope though. The war is not going to turn against you. But to do that, you have to subscribe to my channel and click the little bell that says you'll get notifications whenever I drop a video. That's really important. Not quite as important as, uh, submitting laying the groundwork to have two of your cities destroyed by atomic bombs too soon. If so, I apologize. Anyway, please do that. I would appreciate it. Okay. Now, on January 3rd, 1943, the Japanese High Command decided that, and in fact, there was an actual agreement to this, that they are going to strengthen the South Pacific area operations, and they're going to stop the Allies in New Guinea, and they're going to stop the Allies in the Solomon Islands. This, by the way, is after they completely got their ass handed to them on Guadalcanal. The evacuation was almost complete. So that's kind of like, closing the barn door after the horse got out because, they were not going to stop. Uh, we're not going to stop the Allies anymore. But what made it worse was that they decided to double down in an area they had no hope of winning. It's like Uncle Remus, the folktale that the tar baby, where I forget the context. I was a kid. Okay, sorry, I barely remember it. But the whole thing was a tar baby was to lure someone to keep punching, and every time you punch, the fist would get caught, and you couldn't pull it out. And the Japanese did not have much in the way of reserves, Once their frontline first class troops and planes, pilots, their ships, their crews uh, got worn down by attrition, they didn't have anybody left. And they had no significant training going on to replace their losses. So all they were doing with this decision was hastening their the end of the war because the cream of the crop was destroyed, not at Midway. Midway stopped their offensives against Hawaii, and it was important, but they lost all of their reserves. I mean, their frontline people pretty much in the Solomons and New Guinea. So that was good for us. It's good for me if you like this video. Come on, you can do it. I know you can do it. Just click the thumbs up, leave a comment. It's all you need, right? Hours and hours I spend slaving over a hot stove making these videos. The least you can do is tell me I look nice in that new dress and like my video and comment, okay? Thanks. On January 3rd, 1943, a British sailor commando who did something that doesn't normally happen. Usually these people, these types of raids fail and either they die or they get executed if they're against the Germans or they're captured. But this particular British military serviceman, Signalman A. Ferrer, he penetrated the Italian Navy's main harbor in Palermo in Sicily on a human torpedo. And he did manage to get that under an Italian light cruiser, the Ulpio Traiano, and swam away and blew up the ship. The I guess it was kind of a little bit of revenge from when the Italian frogmen did the same thing in Alexandria earlier in the war, but they knocked out two battleships. They didn't sink them, but they knocked them out for about 4 or 5 months. This was a sinking, so I guess kind of, go Brits, but still, hell of a brave thing to do. I can't imagine doing that. I mean, those British commandos were absolutely insanely brave. So good for them. Speaking of insanely brave, uh, Pappy Boyington, who was famous for a terrible show on NBC in the 70s, Baba Black Sheep. If you know anything about him, he was a Marine Corps pilot. He decided to join the Flying Tigers in China. He went there, argued with Chenault, the American head of the Flying Tigers, was obstinate, raging alcoholic. He was in a P-40 at the time in China, which was not good for dogfighting. He insisted on trying to dogfight. Anyway, he did survive, but as soon as Pearl Harbor happened, he decided he wanted to go back to Marines, which he did. Eventually, he was given a squadron of fighters, and he fought in the Solomons. He was shot down on this date over Rabaul, and which was the main base that we were fighting to close or destroy for most of 42 and 43. He At the time he had the highest number of victories of an American ace. Now he was going to be overtaken by a number of fighter pilots later in the war, but at least when he went down, he had beaten Eddie Rickenbacker's record. He was rescued by a Japanese submarine, and he was taken to Japan, where he endured horrible brutality and Japanese imprisonment. But he was awarded the Medal of Honor, and he had a very hard life. Let's put it that way. Eventually, he did stop drinking, was able to go to AA, but he was quite a handful when he was in his cups, as they say. And then finally, in January 3rd, 1945, the American High Command decided to make some clear delineation of whose responsibility was going to be whose in what was left of the invasions to come in World War II and the Pacific Front. In this case, if you remember, Nimitz was in charge of the Central Pacific Front. So they started with the Gilbert Islands. They went to the Caroline Islands, the Marshall Islands, Saipan, Guam, and next was going to be Iwo Jima, Okinawa. MacArthur was in charge of the Southwest Pacific operations, which was, part of the Solomons, New Guinea, and the Philippines. And so there wasn't much left to do by 1945. There was only about 8 months left in the war. So the decision was made that it was going to be a joint leadership situation where Nimitz was going to be in charge of the attacks on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, because those were going to be seaborne invasions with the Marines and well, Army too in Okinawa, and then for the mainland, it was going to be MacArthur going to be in charge of that. Well, it wasn't like this was any kind of a huge new thing they had decided on. This is kind of just continuing what they had done the entire time. The only difference was that there wasn't an invasion of Japan because of the atomic bombs, but this was just kind of putting a rubber stamp on something that was already being done. So I'm going to put a rubber stamp on this video right now by saying thank you for watching. I look forward to giving you another video tomorrow.